minutes on. What I want to share with you in the next 50 minutes is why I recommend blogging, why I recommend using social media, and then how to do it to create a purple cow. Because if your blog is not a purple cow, no one's going to read it. So that's our first subject of the two. So to try and convince you why, every single year a survey comes out. The essence of the survey is more in-house lawyers and others are using blogs as a means of finding outside counsel. And for those of you who represent businesses, and particularly businesses that have in-house lawyers, as in-house lawyers get younger, it's going to only increase. So one of the reasons I would be blogging right now if I were still practicing law, I shared with you earlier this morning, and that is it really doesn't take lots of time, and I could be very organized about it and do it efficiently and effectively and strategically. So first I want to tell you there are blogs out there about how to blog. The two that I use more than any other are Copyblogger and ProBlogger. But there are others as well. Copyblogger and ProBlogger. If you go to Copyblogger, you can actually sign up, and they literally have ebooks, relatively lengthy, on all kinds of subjects on blogging, including search engine optimization and various other topics. So I'm a big believer in reading what bloggers who are focused on copywriting and marketing and things unrelated to law teach and share about blogging. The first thing you have to think about in blogging is who is your intended reader? And you may not recognize it, but you have three potential groups of intended readers. What do you suppose the first group is? And most important, likely? Clients and potential clients. What do you suppose another of the two other groups would be? Could be. Could be. People who are going to share your blog. So the first intended group is clients, potential clients. The second group is people who are going to share your blog on social media sites or by email. And if you've been here the entire morning, what do you suppose the third group is? Google search engines. Three important readers or audience. A better way of saying it is not readers, because Google search engine's not reading your blog. Audiences. You want your blog to be read by clients, potential clients, referral sources. You want your blog read by people who will then share it. And you want your blog read by, high up in the Google search engines. How many of you are participate in Google+? One of the reasons to participate in Google+, I don't know if the right term is member or whatever the right term is because when you put your blog on Google+, it goes higher up in the Google search engine for 24 hours. The first 24 hours, if you share your blog on Google+, it will be higher on the search engines. Okay, so I've talked so far about audiences, but who's your intended reader? I tell people, blog with a purpose, blog with a strategy. Don't just blog to be blogging because everyone else seems to be doing it. So the first question you ask yourself is, who is your intended reader of this blog post? Who is your intended reader? Before you even start writing. Why does the reader care about this topic? If the reader does not care about the topic, you're just practicing writing blog posts. The third question for your strategic blogging What's the reader's takeaway? What do you want the reader to come away with out of this blog post? And the fourth question is, what do you want the reader to think of you and your firm? Okay, I want to repeat this. Who's the intended reader? Why should they care? What's their takeaway? What do you want them to think of you as a result of this blog post? Before I write any blog, I ask myself those four very strategic questions. How do you pick a topic? If you were here earlier, you heard me talk about problems, opportunities, and changes. Any of you construction lawyers by chance? See, that's why I went into construction law. There are so few people that do it. There's a magazine published by McGraw-Hill called Engineering News Record. Comes out weekly, still comes out weekly, but they also have daily things now on the internet. Every week when it came out, I would have young lawyers who worked for me to go through the magazine, find the business article that they thought created a legal topic that would impact our clients. So that, I mentioned earlier, I read the Wall Street Journal much the same way. I read the New York Times, the Washington Post, Dallas Morning News. I'm looking for what's going on in the world that impacts my contractor clients. So that's one way. Breaking news. Again, I'm looking for the breaking news. Some fields, like real estate, for example, I don't think there's much that changes on real estate law on a daily basis. But the Computer Fraud Act that Sean Tuma is working on, or internet, IP law, technology, healthcare. Think about all the other areas that change almost every day. There's something in the news every day. Another source is your billable work. I mentioned that earlier in the morning. Every time I did billable work, I'm thinking, how can I take this billable work and create an article or now a blog post? Some of you asked me to spell the various applications I mentioned for the iPad and the iPhone. So now you can actually see how they're spelled. So I use Flipboard as a source. So on my Flipboard page, I have my Twitter account, my LinkedIn account, my Facebook account. I could do a search on Flipboard for Grand Rapids, for Michigan State, University of Michigan, for college football, for beer, wine. You pick the topic. I can, whatever the topic is, I can find materials. I use Zite, spelled Z-I-T-E. And on Zite, I mentioned earlier, I have infrastructure, construction, real estate, and various other topics like that. I use Google Alerts. I use Google Alerts less than I used to. And the reason I use them less than I used to is because now with Zite and Flipboard, I can drill down and get more closer material. When I had Google Alerts, I had Google Alerts for highway construction, rail construction, airport construction, bridge construction, and I would find out about a rural road that was being built in a county in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan that really didn't impact my construction clients. So Google Alerts was very, very hard to narrow, but Zite and Flipboard, you can actually put a thumbs up and a thumbs down. Thumbs up means I want more like this, so they keep narrowing. Okay, writing tips for your blogs. The first thing you need to understand is how readers read blogs. They don't read them, they skim. If I'm reading a novel, I'm reading across. I'm not a really fast reader. I read across. People read blogs down. They don't read across. They're reading them down. And they're skimming them. One of the things that you need to understand is something like 80% will not get to the end of your blog. So if I'm writing a blog, my headline in my first sentence better be damn good. there's an article, there's several articles, the essence of which is you're not going to get to the end of the article. By the way, look at this screen. I think what the writer has done fairly strategically is have lots of white space. You want lots of white space in your blog. Easy to read. Take a look at your blog on your iPad, take a look at your blog on your iPhone, even on the computer. Is it easy to read? You know, what's the spacing? If I can read this down, and I can read it fairly easily. Don't just report the news. Such and such case happened. Wow, I don't really care. But your reader's going to care about what it means to them. I actually retweeted something this week. It was a really interesting article, and the essence of the article is if you're writing a blog, don't write about the law. Write about how the law impacts your reader. What are the essential ingredients? What do you think the most important element of your blog is? The headline. Why is the headline the most important? I can't hear you. Well, one reason the headline's important is because it's what Google's going to look at first searching. The second reason is I think I mentioned earlier that I now read the Dallas Morning News on my iPad, which is kind of an interesting experience change. But if I don't like the headline, I'm not pulling it out to read what's below it. I'm deciding what to read based on the headline. You know, in advertising, they used to say the photo leads to the headline leads to the more detailed information. If people don't like the photo, they don't get to the headline. If they don't like the headline, they don't get to the detail. So the magnetic headline is the most important thing. How many of you use an RSS feed for getting blogs to you? Okay, so I was quite upset when Google got rid of Google Reader. That kind of messed me up. So now I use the replacements. But in Google Reader, all you see is the headlines. And so I subscribe to many, many blogs. I told you this morning, if you can only subscribe to one, please CordellBlog.com. 2, Seth Godin TypePad, I think is what it is. So I've subscribed to many blogs. I probably read less than 10% of what I subscribe to. And I only decide based on the headline. So the headline, you've got to have a good headline. There are websites that would help you determine this word is better than that. Google AdWords is one of them, but there are many others. But, you know, if you read my blog, very frequently I start out with client development, : And there I use client development because I think that's what a search term might be for what it is I'm going to be writing about. So what would the search term be for what you would write about? Open with a bang. I said earlier, people don't care about the history of Swiss watchmaking. I never went to a journalism class, but thankfully I learned something without going, and the essence of what I learned is don't bury the lead. Don't bury the lead. Read newspaper articles, read magazine articles. They're not burying the lead. One of the ways to get a good lead is to ask a question. You'll see in my blog, if you regularly read it, that frequently I'm asking a question. What are you doing the next 90 days for client development? You could give a startling statistic. Do something that captures the imagination of your reader. I think you mentioned earlier I'm working on two novels. One of the things I've learned about writing novels, I'm now reading them differently. It's really kind of interesting. Longer story, different day. But I can almost tell from the first page whether I'm going to read that novel. And certainly by the first 5 pages, I've decided. Have any of you read Gone Girl? I came very close to not reading that book. And at the end, I would have been quite sad if I had not read it. But the first part of that book just bored me to tears, to be honest. And the book's probably 1, 2, or 3 in the New York Times bestseller list. The point I'm making as to blogging is that next to the headline, that first paragraph could not be more important. Choose the right words. I hope someone can yell this out. If I said to you, what are the 2 most important words you can put in your blog, what would be one of them? Don't yell all at once. You. What do you think the second word is on this screen? Because. You and because. When I get email alerts from law firms that were sent by the marketing department of a big law firm, I think I mentioned I try to unsubscribe to each one. But if I got an email alert from a lawyer who said, I think you will find this valuable because I'm going to open it. 2 most important words in your blog are you and because. I think many of these other words that are on this page would not fit for what we do as lawyers, but certainly you and because. People love bullet points in blogs. They like brevity and they like bullet points. My construction clients, before blogs were even dreamed of, my construction clients would say, just give me the checklist. Give me the checklist of what I need to do. That's what your readers want in a blog. If you're going to have subheads, if your blog is any length at all, like more than 300 words, you should have subheads. And one of the reasons to have subheads is after the headline, what do you suppose Google searches next? The subheadings. Internal cliffhangers. Again, writing novels. How many of you have been reading a book at night? Gone Girl would be a great example. And you're getting ready to go to sleep, and you get to the end of the chapter, and you just can't put the book down. You've got to go to the next chapter. Well, how does that apply to blogging? 2 ways. One, you want to get readers to the end of your blog, that 80-some-odd% that don't get to the end. You want them to be for other lawyers' blogs, not your own. Second, you want readers to read the next blog you write. It's not unusual for me to say, in my next post, I will blah, 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 blah. So internal cliffhangers. You need to have good visuals. One reason to have visuals is to break up the text. Again, white space. You want lots of white space. Break up the text with visuals. Jay O'Keefe, who writes this Virginia appellate law blog, he always has an interesting, usually humorous visual. And I would not put it at the very top because it doesn't break up the text, but the visuals denote what he's trying to talk about. Where do you get visuals? Well, there's a variety of places. I have actually taken my iPhone, taken a yellow Post-it note, taken a magic marker and written something. I can't draw very well. And taken a photo of it, and that's my visual. I've had visuals of covers of books. But you can, I use iStock Photo. I've also used some of these Shutterstock, for example. Shutterstock very frequently will say you can download 25 visuals a day for the next month for X amount of money. So we download 25 a day for the month and hope we have enough to last for a long time. You can actually use visuals off of Google without violating a copyright law. Does anyone know how to do that? One. Would anyone like to know how to do it? Okay, you're doing a search on Google. So you do the search. Then you go to images. And now you're going to have all the photos of what it is you just searched. Then you go over to the right upper corner and you'll see a wheel, like a wheel. If you click on that, one of the drop-down topics is advanced search. If you click on that, when you go to the bottom, it'll say free to share and change, free to share commercially. Now, what typically happens is that photo you loved when you were on the first page goes bye-bye. But that's a way to get photos off of Google without violating a copyright. There's also, some of you are likely familiar with Creative Commons. That's on the, what's the photo website where you upload photos? What is it? Flickr. Yeah, so Flickr has Creative Commons where you can download and not violate copyright. I'm a big believer in putting video in blog posts when appropriate. And by the way, the video shouldn't be 60 minutes. No one's going to, if the video's more than a minute, I likely don't put it in there. One of the interesting things about YouTube, suppose Seth Godin has given an hour-long talk, the video I showed earlier this morning. On YouTube, there's probably this minute, that minute, etc. So that's where I can get the video clips. You want to close in style. Remember I said people are not hiring journalists when they're reading lawyer blogs. They could care less that you're a good journalist. So you need to have your takeaway. Emery O'Brien does the Midwest Insurance Law blog. She's in a small firm in Omaha. And I urge you to, if you can find her blog, take a look at it, because among other things, in her blog she shows lots of personality. When she first started writing this blog, she sent me several draft blog posts. And I said, Anne-Marie, you do not talk like this. I said, quit being so formal and stiff and stuff like that. And if you read her blog now, it's very personal, very, how should I put it? You have a sense of who she is, both as a lawyer and a person. But she always ends her blog post with the bottom, she calls it the bottom line. Now, one of the things I've shared with her is I don't particularly like the change in font color. It's just a subjective thing with me. But she changes the font color to make sure people get to the end. So I think actually in that sense it's a good strategy. Again, show your knowledge. So this is a lawyer I coached from Quebec. And I wrote a blog post suggesting this very thing, and he said to me, you must be talking about my blog because I've never done that. So ever since he's been doing it. So some other things. I like using analogies. Remember I showed you Jay O'Keefe. I've shown you 2 of his blog posts. He starts out one blog post by saying, what are your chances of getting an oral argument before the Fourth Circuit? ? It's a good start. I'm kind of interested in that, particularly if I'm practicing law in the Fourth Circuit. Then what he does is uses the analogy. he says, let's take a look at the chances of your kid getting into an Ivy League school. And he goes through the percentages. And then as soon as he finishes that, he's got a little chart with that. Then he says, your chances of getting an oral argument in the Fourth Circuit are about the same as your kid getting in a mid-level Ivy League school. So he's used an analogy. Charlie Sarton's a lawyer I coach in Dallas that writes an energy law blog. And by the way, he brought me his blog post in a Word document, and I said, Charlie, no one's going to read this stuff. No one is going to read this stuff. And his blog right now is one of the most read in the energy field of law in the country. So in this particular blog, he's making the analogy of something to do with landmen and the real estate portion of oil and gas, comparing it to a football field. And so in this case, he's got one of his colleagues writing, and his colleague's from Texas A&M, and Charlie wrote the week before about something related to LSU. So I think it's interesting. It makes a blog more interesting to make it analogous, taking something in law and making it analogous to something in other parts of our life. I think it's really fine to use a little humor in blogs. Now, I don't like that kind of visual. That's just me. I like real photographs. But Cleve Clinton's a lawyer I coached, and his colleague I coached as well, Jamie. And they decided they asked me, well, how are we going to reach people with a general litigation blog? I thought it was a really super question. I said, you got to make it interesting. So the way they've made it interesting is taking real cases, and then they make up the names, waiting to bolster attendance for his newly acquired and struggling Marfa baseball team, the Giants' Bick Benedict. So I want to read their blog just to find out the names they've made up for these characters that they're writing about. Then at the end of every blog, they have the analysis, tilting the scales in your favor. But you can see, because they have the caricatures, this is meant to be humorous, but then make a serious point. Now, I couldn't write that. I couldn't make up the names they make up. So it doesn't fit for all of us. But the point I'm trying to make is find a way to make your blog different than every other litigation blog that's out there. Writing tips. Shorter is better. I showed you Jay O'Keefe's appellate law blog. I've only argued about 2 or 3 appellate cases ever. So I'm not very interested in that field, but his blog is interesting to me. I've read other appellate law blogs that sometimes are as long as 3,000 words. I want to tell you, no one's reading 3,000 words. Think about how long 3,000 words is. They're reading it on their computer. They're not printing it. I think it's very rare that they would be printing it. So I like around 350, 400 words, round numbers. Shorter is better. Short paragraphs. If you read my blog, rarely is a paragraph more than 2 sentences. And why do you suppose that is?
Easier to read.
More white space. Easier to read. I want lots of white space. If look on your computer sometime at a long paragraph, you'll get a headache trying to read it, particularly depending on how big the font is. So I think font is really important. Anne Marie's blog that I shared with you, her font is larger than mine, larger than many that I see. And I kind of like it. I guess it's an age thing with me. But it needs to be easy to read. Active links. If you've cited a case, you've cited a newspaper article from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, wherever it happens to be, if I can't click on it, I'm not happy. Active links. And this is how to do active links. Today, when I said greetings from Grand Rapids, I said if you want the handout materials, click here. I rarely do the active link that way. Instead, I'll have the title of whatever the article is with an active link. Make sure to learn how to do active links. So there's the active link, and if someone clicked on it, that's what they would get. So here's an example of a blog with active links, short paragraphs, short sentences, and an image. Yes?
Go back to Seth. Is that his entire blog right there? That entry?
That I wrote on, yeah. Yeah. Seth Godin's blogs are typically very short. He's actually had a blog that was maybe 2 sentences long, but it was important 2 sentences. Sometimes less is more, actually. So this is an example. Jeff Polsky's the lawyer I coached from San Francisco. It does an California employment law blog. He very effectively uses images. If I chose, I could find baby pictures to illustrate every point I'm trying to make, or young children, or old people. You know when you're at the car wash and they have all these cards, the birthday ones with the old photos from the 40s or whatever. Those photos are out there. So I think this is a good example of how to do it and make it easily read. One thing I urge is guest posts. I mentioned that earlier. When you have someone do a guest post on your blog, whether it's a client referral source or a judge, if they would do such a thing, what do you suppose they're going to do with the blog when it comes out? They're going to share it. So all of a sudden you have a bunch of new readers. And what you hope is that they'll read more of your blog posts. So let's turn to social media. This will be the 3rd time some of you have heard this discussion. Hopefully it's a different take on it. What I want to do is talk about why social media and how to use it. Those 2 main things. So one of the whys is it's a tool to engage people. Sean Tuma, who I've mentioned several times today, came and did a program for lawyers I coach, and he actually has a webinar. If any of you are interested in the link to it, send me an email and I'll send you the link. But he's taken social media to a different level than when we worked together. And what he did as an experiment is he took an hour on Saturday morning and spent that hour on social media and then shared with the group he had just spoken before all the things he did on social media in an hour while drinking coffee. And I think I mentioned to you this morning, in the hour while I drank coffee at the hotel this morning, actually 2 cups worth, I scheduled five links. Most of them were to SlideShare presentations to come out next week, Monday through Friday. I mean, it took way less than the hour. I was still kind of wondering when 9:40 was going to roll around. So why use social media? The first reason is it's an efficient and effective way to build relationships. It is so efficient. You get to choose. I don't get to choose when I can have lunch with somebody, but I get to choose when I'm going to connect with someone on social media. And again, I could be up at 3 o'clock in the morning and connect with people the next day at 3 o'clock in the afternoon if I chose. The second reason is this concept of weak tie buzz that I talked about earlier. Remember, the goal of client development is to increase the number of people who know what you know and are out there recommending you. Through social media, you can increase that number. Someone asked me, how do you get followers on Twitter? Well, one way is to follow movers and shakers in your business, but there are a variety of other ways. But every single day I'm getting more Twitter followers. So getting the first 100's hard. Getting the next 2,000 is relatively easy. Again, it's a pull tactic. Reduces the luck factor. It's a tool to listen and monitor what's happening to your clients. If you're not following clients on Twitter, if they're businesses and they're on Twitter, you're making a mistake. If they're on Twitter, you should be following them. It levels the playing field for small firms and young lawyers. It's a tool to show you're the expert. It's because in-house lawyers are using social media more than ever before. It forces you to create valuable content. It improves your writing and communication skills. It provides a way to get feedback. You know, I love, we were talking earlier about people doing evaluations of us. I love evaluations. As long as they say, oh, he was the best speaker I've ever heard. But sometimes the evaluation you don't like is more valuable. It gives you an opportunity to lead. It reduces or eliminates email blasts. It's available 24/7. As I said earlier, it's an efficient and effective way to stay in touch. I had this slide on earlier this morning, the locate and organize. So locate and organize, one way is Google Alerts. Another is RSS feeds. The replacements for Google Reader include Feedly. I don't know if any of you are using Feedly since Google Reader went out of business. NetVibe is the other one. One thing I like about NetVibe is the layout of it is very similar to what my iGoogle page was. Flipboard, Zite. So tools to disseminate include Zite. If I'm looking at an article on Zite, I can click and down at the bottom it says share, and I can share on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and every place else. Hootsuite I mentioned this morning is a tool to disseminate. I mentioned Buffer as a tool to disseminate. Connect with people on LinkedIn. Connect on Twitter. So what's the future? One of the things in the future is going to be video blogging. So that's the end. You all should have my email, cparvin@cordellparvin.com. I'm sure you're going to connect with me on LinkedIn. I think one person has connected with me on LinkedIn since I've been here today. So I look forward to connecting with you on LinkedIn. And if I can help in any way, you know how to find me. Thank you very much.